Okay. Right, so let's start. Basically, this is the Miscellany News podcast, more than Miscellaneous, and we're excited to have everyone here. Basically, Izzy and I usually co-host this, and this time round where we've got a lovely conversation with the larger vet community, because Francisco Andrade, our humor editor, put together a section where instead of doing humor, he put together vets' voices for Veterans Day. And yeah, if you want to launch it, Francisco, and talk a little bit about it.
Sure, absolutely. So if, as everyone sitting around here may know, Veterans Day is November 11th. Represents the 11th day, the 11th hour, the 11th month, which is the 1 year marking the end of World War I. Ever since then, we've been celebrating Veterans Day, and because it was coming up, I decided about a month ago that I wanted to do a veterans voice since we have 30 plus veterans on campus at any given time thanks to the Posse program. So I appreciate all the vets sitting in the circle for helping me put this together, as well as the non-vets who helped me put this together. Everyone in the newspaper was very welcoming of it. They helped out a lot, so thank you for that as well. We couldn't do it without support. And Tiffany helped me with everything. She found out that I was doing this and she took the lead, and honestly I couldn't have done it without her. I was about to go crazy at some point, so I appreciate it. But yeah, and then I guess we can just jump right into it. This is going to start with some introductions, please. I'm Francisco Andrade. I am a second year student, and I was an Army vet. You don't have to say your branch if you don't want to. I just did because I want to show off.
Tiffany Trumble. I'm a first year student in U.S. Army as well.
Romario Ortiz, U.S. Army, and third year here at Vassar.
Well, Mark Savarese, second year student as well, a Marine.
I'm Thomas Dadoly, third year student, Marine Corps.
Nicholas West, junior, and I was in the Air Force.
Brittany Andrade. I'm not actually a student. I'm Francisco's wife, and I was in the Army.
My name is Jaime del Razo. I'm an assistant professor of education here at Vassar College, U.S. Army vet.
Cool. So I figured the way we're going to do this is going to be a really informal conversation, and we could just talk about the stories. I know all of you should have gotten the questions on the email, and sometime we go over. But basically, this is what the section looked like, and I think a lot of people here wrote a story for it. And Tiffany, do you want to take the lead and start asking the questions?
Yeah, so I figured we'll start with Mark since you have to leave first. If you want to give us a little bit about your story and why you chose to write that piece, that'd be great.
Okay, I kind of went into it without expectations on how it'd be interpreted or anything. So following that compass, I just thought I'd write something very truthful and very faithful, and just provide some invitation into our lives as I could provide. And yeah, I guess intimacy, in a word, was something I was shooting for. And from there, it's meant to have poetic meaning from which anyone in the audience can derive. So.
Nick, did you have anything you want to say about your piece?
Yeah, so I think for me, like, Veterans Day is kind of a day that brings up a lot of, like, conflicting emotions, just because I, like, come from, like, a military family, and, like, I serve myself, so there's a lot of, like, pride that comes with that. But then at the same time, as someone who finds himself on sort of the left end of like the political spectrum, I have a lot of like problems, of course, with like what the what the military does, and some of the things that like my service actually like helped contribute to. So I just kind of wanted to explore that, but at the same time, I sort of have noticed in a lot of like left-wing spaces that there's sort of a lot of like negative stereotypes about like veterans that really get pushed, and as much as I understand the source of those, I think they're sort of like a harmful thing, and just something that I hope that our presence here has done is help like dispel a lot of those, and so yeah, so I just sort of wanted to write about that and just let it be known that a lot of veterans have just as many problems with the military as most people do. So.
Have you experienced any of the stereotypes you're referring to since you've been at Vassar? If you want to tell us about it.
At Vassar, no. It's more sort of in like broader spaces. Going to like I've done some like political like canvassing and just like gotten some not negative reactions, but just like people like questioning like why I'm a leftist and like why I would have joined the military in the first place, which for me, like the military was something that actually like sort of radicalized me and like pushed me farther. So I just think a lot of people have sort of a backwards interpretation of what service in the military does to people. And yeah, so yeah.
Britt, just to switch it up a bit, you, I believe, transitioned most recently out of the military. Do you want to tell us about how your experience is with that so far?
So technically I'm still in. I don't officially get out until December, so that's been fun. It's been really weird, honestly, and the hardest transition has actually not been communicating that I served to, like, males in, like, my fields or where I work. A lot of women are always really surprised to hear that I'm a vet. They're like, oh, you're a vet? Your husband's not the vet? You're the vet? And it's just because there's not a lot of women in the military and we're not a forefront in media. And so it was very interesting when women hear that because they're like, oh, you know, what were your experiences? And the first question is always, were you sexually assaulted? Because that's the thing everyone knows about for women in the military. And I'm just like, no, I'm good. And even if I was, I don't know you. That's not something I want to discuss with you. So it's very interesting to see how people react when they're like, oh, you're not the face I associate with the military. And it just kind of like shocks them a little bit.
It's funny, that speaks on like what I wrote about, but it's essentially exactly what I wrote about, because I feel like we all kind of get that. And Roberta Samples, who I wrote about in my piece, has been out of the Army or the Air Force for years, and she still experiences that today. So it doesn't feel like we've gained a whole lot of traction as far as that changing, which is still surprising. For whoever wants to talk about it, is there any kind of reaction you didn't expect to get from students when you tell them that you served in the military, or anything at all? Tommy, you want to share?
To call you out.
Yeah.
Since you're
I'll
here.
come up with something.
Shots fired.
You were saying that you haven't got any of the cliche experiences at Vassar. I have had a few of those cliche veteran experiences where people come up to you and they ask you like, have you ever killed anybody in the military? That's a popular one. I think some people, I haven't got it so often, but it happened like twice in 1 week here at one point. It hasn't happened since though. And also after that, in my Africanus course, I got the feeling that one of the students was very anti-military, and the questions that they approached me with were very were coming from like what I just view as very left-wing questions, like and I say left-wing because like those things that I haven't been exposed to while I was in the military and I'm only exposed to here in Vassar. We look at the military, we say right-wing, and left-wing when we look at Vassar. And
but they were confrontational.
No, they weren't confrontational about it. They were as respectful as they could possibly be while trying to get their point across. Okay. And I think the questions themselves are just confrontational to the military way of life. So, like, specifically, it was about the military's effect, like how the military as a force just colonizes different the areas that they go into. And what my experience with that was, and the interactions that the military has with whatever force, wherever we are, with the people, like the experiences, that the interactions between the military as an occupying force and the people who live there. So, and that's hard to explain.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it at a personal level and what we do at a personal level, but we really don't see it on the grand scale, how it affects the people there. I mean, we know what we do, but it's hard to like take it as a whole.
I think that's the important thing that we really, the point of the Vets Voices was for me when I was trying to make it is I wanted to be as inclusive as possible with all the vets because all of us had different experiences. And I think that's the biggest point to get across, is that all of us not only had different experiences, we're completely different people. Mm-hmm. So one of the biggest things that rings in my head as far as like asking questions or biggest experience coming was when I was working here at the school, and one of the students asked me, almost a direct quote was, "Can you tell me more about the Army so I stop hating it as much?" And I'm just like, well, first of all, that's not how you ask anybody anything, but also like, why, like, even if you hate the military complex, even if you hate what you think the military is, and I get that, I've been in there, like, I haven't enjoyed every day, like, I get it, but at the same time, it's like acting like people in the military are all just like walking around with rifles and just killing people indiscriminately. It's just completely wrong. Like, we're all, there's people that have been deeply affected by everything that they've done, and I've met them and I've seen it, and and it's just.
Well,
it's
we're
just,
also about to watch Full Metal Jacket here.
which is a movie that shows how the stress can get to you. But the
Nice
point
plug-in,
is,
Tom. Thank you.
but I think the point is that we're all different, and like none of us are gonna like it, none of us are gonna hate it. Like, it's just gonna change for everybody, and I think that's the most important thing to realize.
How'd you respond to that when they asked you that?
There was a pivotal change in the atmosphere. I'll say that, because two of the people that were in the office with me, they just, like, one of them loudly gasped when the person asked this question. And I just looked at the person. I'm trying not to say anything about them, but I just looked at the person and I asked them why they felt that way. And then they mentioned kind of the same thing I just did. It's like, oh, I just think the military is doing this and that and this and that. And I'm just like, okay, but do you think I'm doing that? Do you think I personally am fighting for that? As you've known me, am I a person that would do that? And he's like, well, no, but then, and I was like, okay, that's the end of that question, and that's it. Because I'm also not going to give that person really too much of the time of day, but I also got to challenge their thinking a little bit. Because, I mean, you can't always... you don't always want to explain to people and have that patience to, like, explain to people, especially if they come at you rudely. I get that, like, but at the same time, you got to give them, so you can't just ignore it, because I think you got to give them something to think about. You can't just let them have, like, oh yeah, I asked him this and he just ignored me, which means I must be right. And then, you gotta leave people, like, pensive about what they said.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the hardest part, is for a lot of people outside looking in. I've heard us referred to as Trump's Army, which it's hard to dispel them of that idea.
That's offensive.
Yeah,
that's the worst.
I was
I do think that's a good transition into Romario's piece, though, if you want to kind of share what you're writing about.
So Francisco mentioned aspect of how these interactions with students and veterans on Vassar tend to be some either not really confrontational, how Tommy was saying, it's more of a discussion, and then also there's ways that questions are asked that aren't asked the right way. The way I see it, it's kind of like blissful ignorance, and that stems from not having exposure to individuals like us, or be in situations that make you interact with people like us. So then you and I mean, like, Vassar students or anyone not related to the military, their perceptions are skewed because they consume media and entertainment and stereotypes of, whatever is said about us, which is usually always the repetitive stereotypes that, right wing, Trump's Army, all this stuff like that. But then when you think about it, like, all the ideals that we ascribe to are contradictory to what that message says, We talk about honor, we talk about integrity, respect, being an honor. Those are things that dude don't represent. So that's what I mean, how it's sort of blissfully ignorant of students to say or think these kind of things without ever having interactions with us. That's what my piece was about. In one way, didn't make it in print because it was, like, excessively long. Thank you, Tiffany, for helping me deconstruct that and put those words better, make them flow better.
For the record, just so clarity, Romario's piece will be up online within the next week. It's finishing up. It's the importance of thank you for your service, and why it's important and not important at the same time. And he explains the meaning of the phrase and what it means to him.
Yeah, it definitely. So the part that really got to me was turning that piece into more of a personal piece. That enabled me to really speak specifically versus the prior piece when we were editing it, where it was too broad. There wasn't a central idea. So the central idea of my piece is titled, "Don't Thank Me for My Service. Ask Me About It."
Yeah.
So that the title pretty much explains that whole idea. I mean, the article piece explains that whole idea, and that's when it became personal. So then I had to like retreat back and sort of process the things that I witnessed, saw, was a part of, and then I felt that if I portray that piece, the emotional aspect of it in the piece, in the writing, that will enable people that are reading it to view another perspective that defeats that stereotype of what is thought of when you think of the military and the individuals in it. So for example, one of the points I hit on was, look, my job, I was a transport guy, logistics. That is a job that, and this was the hardest part to figure out, how do you put like in a in a literal sense the term pogue? It's like how do we
We were
make that
brainstorming that
sound?
for a while.
Yeah, we were brainstorming for a while. So then, how do we?
Can you
Yeah.
explain?
Why not just
Yeah,
say pogue and explain? Did you explain?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
definitely explained that like in 3 sentences.
Can you explain
So-
again for the 3 people in the room? Who don't know what it is?
So a pogue is a colloquial term used to describe a non-infantry military service member. So any job that is non-infantry is called POG, pogue, person other than grunt, because grunts are the infantry. They're the guys that go out and do all that work. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. There's a lot of jobs in the military that are not combat related, but still support combat in some fashion, because the whole military structure is based on logistics. There's an old adage that says a military marches on its stomach, and that has to do with food, supplies, equipment being moved in conjunction with any military movement or efforts.
Bullets can't fly without supply.
Hey.
You're a supply, weren't you?
I was.
Okay.
I was supply. You're
Yeah, so-
welcome.
supply
You're
gives-
welcome
so-
for my service, Romario.
Oh God. Supply
Oh,
would give
God.
shit to us, and then we would take that supply and take it to downrange to everyone that needed the bullets and bombs and ammo to continue the fight. So that was my point of the piece. It's that a major portion of military members, it's non-combat MOSs, military occupational specialties, your job.
20% of us are just infantry. The rest are
Everything else?
support personnel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I had a 9 to 5. I did HR. It was great. I made sure people got promoted, got awards, and their money was straight.
There you go. Most important part, the money.
And we all loved you for it.
You did not. You definitely did not.
And we were angry most of the time because the paperwork got lost, let's be honest.
The number of
Almost all
angry
the
people in my
time.
office was insane. I got really good at handling conflict.
I think the hardest part of us trying to figure out how to describe that word is explain how it's unflattering in a sense. Then we're also describing jobs like I was a nurse and I worked in the ICU at launch stool, and I was a poke because I'm not infantry, but when I'm taking care of the people who are coming from downrange, I didn't feel like I was not doing the Army's work. So it took a while to come up with a way to describe that word.
Yeah. I don't think we emphasize it, but it is it's used in a derogatory way in the military. And the whole thank you for your service piece, did you know that we made our drunk Jenga game at the TH? We made a thank you for your service Jenga
Really?
piece.
Really. Go ahead and finish now.
Yeah, please explain further.
And when you pull the Jenga piece out, because it's a veteran's household, right? we had to have something for us. When a vet pulls it out, what is it? We have to.
Nick's like, I'm not involved in it.
If you pull the Jenga piece
come
out,
on.
if a veteran pulls it out, all non-veterans have to drink, and if a non-veteran pulls it out, all veterans have to drink.
But the thing is, the non-veterans the non-veterans have to say thank you for your service, because
I would never come drink with you. I just
and if a non-veteran pulls it out, we have to say thank you for your cowardice.
Oh, that's terrible. That's awful.
That's
Came up with that.
Hey, you know what? I love it.
I'm so mad that is part of this.
hold on.
Can we take that out?
I just want to say that 5 out of 7 veterans do not approve of
Yes. Miscellany News does not approve this message.
Okay, well let's not edit this. Let's kind of deconstruct it a bit. I mean,
all right,
we're master students, right?
Hey,
Yeah, he wants to get drunk.
Yeah,
That's
let me-
the point of
let-
that.
Regret
No,
having
no, no,
me.
no, we'll talk about this
No.
a little bit. It's a veterans household, and usually we have a lot of Vassar students that are non-veterans
Yeah.
there, mostly the rugby team, but we have a lot of people.
And they're all over the age of 21.
Yes,
course.
They're
all
all
of
over
them.
the age of 21
Yes.
playing this game. Yes.
This is ridiculous.
You know, but it's the truth.
It is,
There-
though.
We've
there's
had
a
this
fact about it.
conversation with
that those students are taking the time to interact with you, right? They're the ones who actually are on the team that with you that make you feel part of this place, and that's the part that we need to kind of view it and, like I said, deconstruct.
And
I
we've
do-
had this
well, I
thank
do
you for your
agree-
service conversation with those people. They know what it means to us. They understand that when, and for them it's a way of making fun of us now, where it's like, Tommy, thank you for your service.
But you also have to remember, it's not just cowardice. Like, sometimes we don't look
Oh, it's-
inviting.
look,
like,
I
if you have resting bitch face all of the time, it's not their fault that they don't want to come
But
into a
no,
conversation
it's-
with
I
you.
get why the
Yeah.
game is there, and
Yeah.
I think it's there to take the stress out and make it a little bit easier to talk about the service and just talk to the
I agree with
veterans in a friendly environment. And I think if everybody's having a good time, which with drunk Jenga, it sounds like everybody's having a good time anyway. I think that's important too, and I know that they all understand that the cowardice thing is just a joke.
So-
as much as that saying thank you for your service
It
during a
was,
drinking game is a joke.
I was against having "Thank you for your cowardness" in there, but when we actually put it out and put it into the tower, and they there was the non-vets who wanted to keep it in. It wasn't us. So
Well, that's good that they want to have a good time.
Gotta look
Good thing
like
it's
a
a
team.
dream.
Changing the subject a little, coming back to the actual conversation and not drinking.
I mean, it's the military. What else do we talk
Since
about?
Jaime, since you're here, I would love to hear how reactions that you may have had, considering I don't know how many professors on campus are veterans. I know there's probably not a lot of you. I would love to hear how your students and maybe even other staff have reacted to you, saying you're a veteran and how that's affected you here. If there, any way you want to talk about.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm in a totally different generation than y'all here, but I'm very grateful to have been invited. And no, we didn't use Pogue in my day. Before I turned into this cranky old vet,
What did you use? Did you use anything?
No, I was a red leg artillery,
Okay.
king of battle.
All right.
Yeah. So we can talk later about that too if you want. But anyways, to your question, I think and for me, the veteran identity has always been a conflicted one for me. It's a difficult one for me. It's been one for me. I was I served with the 1st Armored and the First Gulf War, and I think following that war, it's been difficult to think about, what does it mean for Jaime? I'm just speaking for myself. What does it mean to be a veteran? What does it mean to be a war veteran? What does that mean? And I think there's a lot of messages that are sent to us, right, in society, in the media, in conversations. I guess in drunk Jenga too, There's a lot of different conversations that take place, and you're trying to deal with them as best you can, both in home and where you work. I think as a professor now, I have tried to be as open as I can. Everybody has to decide what that means for everyone, but to talk about that I am a vet, because I think I think people find it hard to identify me as a veteran unless they actually, I tell them. Like if you come to my office, I really don't have anything up that shows I'm a vet. If you come to my home, there's not really anything up. I'm not saying there's anything wrong if anybody does. I'm just saying for me, it's not something that's there. So I think when I do say I'm a vet, I think if I talk about my veteran experience, what I have learned, because my wife is not a vet, she's really has helped me because we've been married for 22 years. And she tells me that when you talk about your service, Jaime, and you talk about the things you're dealing with, we don't know how to respond to that. We don't want to be insensitive, but very few of us have that experience. And I think for me as a professor here on the campus, it's I can see that. But I have not had, at least amongst my colleagues, any kind of negative reaction to my veteran status. You know, to the point where now I'm actively I'm doing what researchers do. I have a research project around that. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Did you want to add in a piece about, I think you're speaking on Veterans Day.
I am.
In the class, if you want to.
Sure. On Veterans Day here at the campus at 5 p.m., Rocky 300, pardon the shameless plug. You know, I'm presenting a talk called The Scuda Military Pipeline, a preliminary report. I started a project here at the campus called the Scuda Military Pipeline that examines the relationship that two big institutions have in this country, DOD or the military, and schools. And what's that relationship? It's one in where high school students are recruited into the U.S. military. I'm a product of that relationship. I was recruited, and when I was in the 12th grade, went to the MEP station, got all my paperwork done, swore in, and graduated from high school. 6 weeks later, I was at boot camp, pushing the earth down. So, you know, I'm a product of it, and I want to study that. I want to study what is this relationship, and this first part of my study wants to look at what are the perceptions of people who have been participants and actors in this relationship. So I have, not to get too ahead of my talk, but to say that I've been able to both survey and interview veterans, teachers, and even a military recruiter to talk about this. And hopefully on Monday, whoever can come and join us, I'll be providing a very preliminary report. It's very early, but Veterans Day, I think it's a good day to do this because I think it speaks to what I'm hearing here and what I read in the Miss, that veterans are not a monolithic group. We are not all the same, just like any other group. And I think I'm hoping that my talk will provide, at least from this veteran, and of course my study, a look at what I'm talking about.